Greetings viewers, EricTheCarGuy here. Today's one of those days where I'm asking myself why I said yes. The reason to make a video for you. Today, a 2004 Acura 3.2L. It has a 6-speed manual transmission in it. This was brought to me last week by the owner who has asked me to install an engine into it. Now, he's also brought the engine and the car, and as I said, asked me to put it all together. Now, this engine still runs. He insists that there's a problem with the rear cylinder head. I was thinking about making a video of diagnosing how everything came together and all that, but this car doesn't even have a battery in it. All I have is an engine, a car, and time. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with this introduction. We are going to replace the engine on this vehicle. Now, traditionally what I would do, and I have done these engines before, I would drop it out the bottom onto a cradle assembly and roll it away, dismount the engine from the transmission and do everything on the floor, roll it back up underneath, and bolt the whole thing in. That's kind of the easy way to do it with a lift. However, this is a manual transmission, so it affords me a little more wiggle room. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to pull this engine and transmission out the top as a unit, switch everything over outside, put it all back together, stick it back in the car. You like engine replacement videos? Here we go. Normally, when you open the hood, you find more stuff. There's plastic covers over this, and there's some plastic covers back here. There's also a battery, but the owner has taken it upon himself to remove the battery and also has already, well, okay, you want to be like that? Be like that. Removed the upper strut brace. So this has already been removed, but this is kind of tricky to get out of there. You've got the cruise control is mounted back here, the fuse box is mounted up here, and as I said, there's some covers over the back. So we're skipping over that part of it, and I'm just going to toss this in the trunk where I found it to begin with, but I wanted to show you that it was there. I also don't have the fasteners to reattach it. This is going to be fun. On these hood struts, which are bad, and you've seen me use this method before, you can just take your pocket screwdriver and pull this clip out, and once that clip is out, you can unhook it from here. There's these fasteners here that hold the lower part of the hood on, and that's it. Schwoops.
I was ready.
That's good, because I wasn't. There we go. Now that we have the hood off, I'm going to lift it up, drain all the fluids out of everything, disconnect a bunch of stuff underneath, and basically try to get it ready so that all I have to do is stuff up top. It's really nice having a lift. There's no wheel lock key for this car, but we've done a video on that in the past. I really hate it when people don't give me wheel locks and then give me their vehicle to work on. I really hate that. Worked that time. You know, the fun part's getting it back off. And now we will resume our job, already in progress. Draining fluids, engine, transmission. I'm gonna get some lower covers down. I'm sure you already sense the contempt that I have for doing this job. However, it is of benefit to you. It is an engine coming out, and you know, we're gonna get something out of it. But like I said, the circumstances with this and the fact that I have other things to do, well, you don't need to hear about my problems. I'm gonna pretty much do this whole operation the flat rate way. I love it. I love it. Every stinking Honda drain plug that's ever been on an oil pan, I believe, has been 17 millimeter. Someone has taken it upon themselves to change the drain plug. In fact, we used to have a joke about this. I said this in the drain plug video that I did. The first thing to go bad on any car is the drain plug, because we get them in after the very first oil change and someone had swapped the drain plug out at a quick lube place. Stop doing that. Just use the thing that came out. Don't use impacts on this stuff. Really? Really? I'm in a mood today. Sorry. I'm not really sorry. But yeah, it's so annoying to have to deal with other people's modifications. Technicians who do this day in and day out do not like it when things are different. Why? Because they're tired of doing it the same anyway. Now for the transmission, gonna get it loose and prepped up. It's been a while since I've worked on the 6-speed. 6-speeds, there's a very small percentage of these out here. This information is sort of narrow. But this is the drain anyway. That's enough oil. We're going to be removing the axles, tipping things at odd angles. If we don't drain the fluid now, well, it could drain for us. unexpectedly. Now I'm going to take this lower cover down while we're at it. These are just plastic rivets that you just squeeze and pull them out. I have this special tool that works kind of well. Yeah, as you can see. Yeah, kinda. I've got a couple of fasteners to remove. Well, that opens things up a bit. Don't over tighten this. You don't want to mushroom the gasket. Really? Going to remove the axle nuts and start to get ready to pull the axles out. If this didn't move, I'd put the nut back on the outside, hit it with a hammer, and try to get it to move. You don't want to hit on the end of the axle. You'll mushroom the end of it. You'll screw up these threads. Don't do that. Penetrating oil. Super rust breaker. This stuff actually works pretty good. Looks like somebody was already in there with an air hammer. It shouldn't be that big, so somebody already had an issue here. Now I'm going to get the lower ball joints off. Get some cotter pins out first. Ball joints. These are 17. I'm also going to do the wishbone bolt while I'm in. 17 on both sides. Nut on the back. Take this and move it. If this does not move, don't worry about it. Leave it, because it's frozen inside the bushing. It's probably never coming out. Just give up. If you run into that issue and it's stuck inside the wishbone and you need to get the axle out, take the inner joint apart, pull it through, and put it back together. That's how you do it. Just leave this alone. Just pull the inner joint apart. It'll go back together. You'll be fine. You know, come to think of it, I don't even need to take the axles all the way out. I could actually leave this connected and just let the axles just sort of hang there. And what I was talking about before when I said drop the whole thing out the bottom, this whole assembly, this whole aluminum piece here, the cradle that holds the lower suspension, holds engine, transmission, everything in. The way they put this thing together at the factory, the engine and transmission are all assembled and put onto this piece. And when it comes down the assembly line, they just take that piece and put it up and made it to the body, and away you go. So it's how they would do it at the factory. So many engine replacements on modern vehicles go this way. A lot of times it's not uncommon to have to pull the whole cradle assembly and everything down, but with this manual transmission, it's not that difficult to pull this out the top. I will now use Thor to knock the lower ball joints loose. Sometimes they're loose and they don't know it. That one knows it's still tight. Really? Never had one on there like this before. Let's try the other side to build my confidence. I'm befuddled. We got a problem. I suspect, since this is a manual transmission, people have had the axle and everything out before. And I often say to people who ask me, Eric, what should I torque that to? And I say, don't worry about it, just tighten it down until it's tight. I have a feeling that that recommendation is coming back to haunt me today because, as you can see, if you look up under here, you can also see it as well. The sleeve that the stud for the ball joint slips through is coming out with the ball joint. So it's not that I'm weak and I can't knock these loose, it's that somebody over-tightened them and now has created an issue. I'm going to deal with said issue by taking the nut for the ball joint, putting it on the bottom here so I don't booger up the threads, same as with the axle. And I'm going to air hammer these things out. And they're going to come out sleeve and all, but you know what? They're going to go back together, hopefully sleeve and all. Compressor might kick on during this process. Don't worry about that. Let's get these axles out. Oh, well, okay. Sorry about that. Go ahead, try and slow me down. Maybe I'll say that after the engine's out. Like I was saying, I could just leave the axle laying there like that. But instead, we'll keep it there. And just to try and expedite the process of reassembly, ready for this? This one, the sleeve came completely out and stayed with the ball joint. I'm just going to leave it. I mean, once I bolt it all back together, it'll be back together. Just prying the axle out of the mid shaft. Well, actually this one, I think I might have to hit it a little bit. Guess what? We've got to remove the exhaust anyway. Let's start with penetrating oil. Now the exhaust. These are 14 millimeters, by the way. They're supposed to be 14 millimeters. And I'm always happy when they come out. Not as happy when they come out as stud and nut. Much prefer when they come out as just the nut, but I'll take what I can get. These should be 14, but they no longer look like 14. This is where wobble extensions really shine. Victory! We had to remove it anyway, and now we can get right to that axle. Now we can easily harvest it. And you know what? Since I took the other one all the way out, I'm going to do the same over here. As long as I'm here, my plans are to remove the radiator to avoid damage to it and give us a little more room to get the engine and transmission out. So I figure I'll just disconnect it while I'm in the neighborhood. Even though we've drained the radiator, there's still maybe something coming out here. You notice on this side, the transmission, if it's an automatic or a manual, it actually has these same attachments. But there's 4 fasteners underneath here, 2 here and 2 here, that go with that mount. I'm going to disconnect these now. Gravity's going to hold it in. It's not going anywhere. Maybe my battery's wearing down. Yeah, I think it needs a battery. One more thing, there's a damper on the back. These are only on manual transmissions. You won't find this on an automatic. 14 millimeter. I'm going to remove the entire assembly. I could just remove this lower bolt, but it would be kind of difficult to fish this back in. And when you're doing stuff like engine and transmission jobs, it's good to think ahead to where you're going to end up. Try not to paint yourself in a corner, so to speak. So I'm always mindful of stuff, and if I can remove something to make my life easier, I will. There's 2 more fasteners up top here. These are the other 2 fasteners I'm removing, and I can get this whole assembly off. Nice cute little shock absorber. Well, take a look in there. I would say that catalytic converter is done. So even with this new engine, it's going to have an exhaust restriction. One of the complaints of the owner was that part of the reason we're doing this is because one of the catalytic converters was clogged. Well, looks like more than one was. I think we've got most of the things disconnected from underneath. Now we'll move up top, get things organized up there, and get ready to pull this engine and transmission out. Something I'm noticing here. Oil filter housing is sticking out quite a bit and looks like it might present an issue when we go to remove the engine. So I'm just going to take the housing right off the front so we don't have to deal with it. So I'm going to lift it back up. And, well, actually, I don't even think I'm going to do that. I'm just going to sneak in through the side. There's a fastener here, and there's one up here. But there's some electrical connections, one for the VTEC solenoid and one for the pressure switch. And I'm going to disconnect now. There's one. I'm going to put my oil catch under it so that when it comes loose and drips out, it won't go all over my floor. VTEC just kicked in, yo. Just thought of something else while removing the oil filter housing. I'm not gonna mess with the AC. I'm just gonna disconnect it from the engine and leave it in the car. To do that, all I really need to do is remove the 4 fasteners that attach it to the block, but first I have to remove the drive belt. And there's also this electrical connector for the clutch. That's more of a just in case kind of deal. 14 millimeter on this tensioner. On the earlier models, it was easy to get to the tensioner from underneath, but these, actually easier from up top. Once I have this radiator out, which I said that I was already going to remove just to try to make this whole operation easier, I'll be able to access the front bolts on the AC compressor, no problem at that point. Now, to gain access to the compressor and to give us more room to play around with and to avoid damage, I'm going to remove the radiator. Also, I'm going to remove the dipstick. Why? This top is plastic. So easy to break. We're just going to put this someplace out of the way. It's the little things that hang you up, like the little plastic clip that won't come out like it's supposed to. Take that. Our handy friend from below. Since I'm going to be removing the engine, I figure that I'll just disconnect the hose at the engine. I don't need this battery tray anymore. I think there went our other clamp. I was right. Electrical connections, and we should be all set. Got one right up here for this fan. 2 10s up top. Theoretically, we should be able to just lift this up out of here. It looks like we got one little hanger on. There's like a wire. It's just a wire that's just hooked onto the fan shroud down here. Look at all this room. Now I'm going to go and attack that AC compressor. These are 12 millimeter on the AC compressor. And I had to put that line like right in front. I'm actually going to try to leave the bolts in there. I'm going to disconnect the power steering as long as we're in the neighborhood. There's a high pressure, low pressure line going to them, and I have a set of plugs here that was sent to me some time ago by Shane Craig. So he works on diesel, and it asked me what I did to avoid contamination, because that's something they're concerned about quite often in the diesel industry. Stuff leaking out. I'm just gonna find one that works. That looks a little small. Look at that. I mean, nailed it. That's cool. You know what, Shane? These are really handy. Thanks, man. Suppose I'm going to go for the airbox next, since it's bolted to the battery tray. I imagine once we get this out of here, we'll have some wide open spaces. That other one I think was broken or stripped. Oh, forgot about those guys. Those guys are just plastic clips that hold this part of the harness going to the fuse box, to the air box. Why? Not sure. We'll try to reseal this so that it can actually filter the air. The new / old engine will thank us. Somebody had some trouble getting that back together. Little harness clip there, 210s. Do that. There are two fasteners underneath here. I believe they're both 12s. And then there's another pair of 12s up here. Sort of going in here blind, got a swivel. There's supposed to be one right up here in this area, but I suppose maybe a clutch job at some point, it went missing. Okay, cameraman Brian had an interesting question. He says, there's a lot of stuff you're disconnecting here. For the first time engine doer, whatever, what do you recommend they do? Well, I'm fortunate enough to have this bench here, but you'll notice like everything I took off has all the fasteners that go with it all together. Exhaust manifold, all the exhaust stuff is with that. The clips, those are all with that. The radiator, the battery tray that I just took off. The fasteners even go in the same place, sometimes on the shock absorber. All of this makes assembly easier. You leave yourself little breadcrumbs. I mean, it's a big job. There's a lot of stuff to do. There's a lot of stuff to remember where it goes. You just tackle it one thing at a time. Anytime you do anything big, it's a bunch of small steps that get you to a goal. And with something like this, you're taking things off the car, keep everything together and organized. Everything here is organized. This whole place is organized as I disconnect things. It may seem haphazard, but it's an organized mess. And therefore, when I go to put it back together, I won't have those stumbling blocks of where does this go? I don't have to scratch my head over it because I know that the fasteners for the part that I took off are with the part. Got the battery tray out, and things are opening up inside this engine bay for sure. Radiator's out, AC compressor's disconnected, drive belt's off. This fuse relay box is kind of in the way. There's only one fastener holding it on. This way I can flop it down, move it someplace more convenient for me. The things I'm going to be attacking next are, looks like I got a vacuum line going down to the engine mount there. I've got this line going to the clutch hydraulics. I don't want to open the clutch hydraulics at all, so I'll just be disconnecting the slave cylinder from the front of the transmission and leaving that in the vehicle in the same way I did the air conditioning, and just leave everything connected. I'm going to try to disconnect as little electrical connections as possible, because I'm hoping that there's a main, I think there's like a main harness connection here that goes to the engine that connects it to the transmission, that makes it kind of easy. There's also a couple of heater hoses back there. Basically, I'm doing this. I'm starting over here and I'm working my way around in a circle back to where I started over on that side. And hopefully by the time I get to the other side, everything's disconnected. Not the right fastener. Oh well. There's a couple of places that the clutch hydraulics are connected. One of them, there's a bracket like way down in here. There's a 10 millimeter that holds it to the transmission case. I'm just going to disconnect it there, and that way that flexible line will allow me to take that whole assembly up out of there. Long extensions are your friend. Once again, breadcrumbs. Now, I know that I laid fasteners for this side of the engine over here up on this wiper blade. Another thing, look at my tool cart. I've been working now for more than an hour. And even though I'm throwing things on and off the tool cart, I have things semi-organized. Like all my pliers are here, ratchets and things are here, sockets are all here, 1/4 inch to this side, 3/8 to this side, power tools in the back. This is actually a technique that I got from cooking. Chefs do this. It's called mise en place. The way to remember that is mice in place. That's the way it was taught to me. Everything has a place. So like a chef will have like the garlic or the onions in a certain spot so they can efficiently walk into any kitchen and start cooking. I try to do the same thing with my tool cart. I leave all my tools in a given place. Even though I'm picking them up and throwing them down, I know the general area where I'm looking. This helps me be efficient. This means that I don't have to go looking for tools, which all that stuff costs you time. And when I started this, I said, I'm gonna do this a flat rate way. Flat rate means you're working against the clock. If you can beat the time that you're given in order to replace this engine, you just made money. If you make time, you broke even. But to make money, you gotta beat time. To beat time, stay organized, stay focused, and hopefully it'll work out. All right, that's disconnected now from back there. The clutch slave is actually underneath the starter. We're gonna have to take the stupid thing off anyway. Might as well just take it off now. Now I wouldn't necessarily put it on with an impact, but taking it off certainly was easier. And if you're wondering about these clips, you just push down on this plastic and it'll unhook from what it's on. And there's a lot of these around here. And to remember where the fastener goes, we got a 17 here and yeah, 14 down below. So this is actually one of the bell housing bolts. Okay, it's 17. Sorry about misleading you. All right, we got two 12s and the slave is ours. Two 12s on top of the slave. Comes out all in one piece. Find some place to live. There you go. I don't care if the metal line bends a little bit. I can bend it back. Slave stuff. Just gonna put up there. Shift linkage maybe. And I think this guy would be great if it stopped falling in my way. Voila. They do it with surgery. They have clamps, they have things that pull your skin out of the way so they can get to where they need to get. This is clipped on. I don't fight for long before I say, you know what? Bye-bye. You got another one, huh? All right. I don't want to go too far with this because I believe all we need to disconnect right here are these, and the whole engine is ours. So I'm going to disconnect these three right now. I'm just trying to lift up on there. That's what I was trying to do before. That should be our engine harness right there. Looks like we got the vacuum line going to the brake booster. I got a couple other lines here. This is the evap line. It looks like we got a fuel line too. This is the vent for the gas tank. It goes to the charcoal canister, most likely. Whenever there's a danger of me like breaking a plastic connector or clip, I just disconnect it. Better to do that now than to break it later. This is a returnless fuel system. And people always ask me, Eric, what's your favorite tool? Pocket screwdriver and my pen. All the stuff flows through the pen. Little plastic. Gotta disconnect it from here too. Okay. Squeeze in on the sides. This thing hasn't been started up in a while. I knew there wasn't going to be any fuel pressure, but yeah, it's a concern when you're disconnecting fuel lines that something like that could happen. Don't break that plastic clip. Just don't do it. Got a couple of heater hoses down below here. I wonder. Yeah, that helps. I'm gonna go get my coolant bucket, stick it down underneath there so when I disconnect those, I don't end up with a huge mess on my floor. Sounds like I hit it. This entire time I'm taking things like these heater hoses and everything else, just moving them up out of the way. I forgot about my shift linkage here. Get this clutch slave out of the way again. This vacuum line goes to an engine mount down the front. The engine mount's staying, but the engine and transmission are coming with me. So I'll just disconnect that there. But also, I'm gonna get this harness up out of my way. I'm gonna have to swap harnesses anyway. The new engine actually had an automatic transmission attached to it. Oh, and by the way, remember when I was looking for the fill? There's the fill for this transmission, it's on the top. My secret weapon for reluctant connectors, just to demonstrate, you just go in there and you can push in on the connector to open it up. Works really well. The whole idea is to access these cotter pins, and I've bent them up out of the way. And there's the covers on the shifters. There's like a plastic washer and a metal washer. One of them's smaller than the other, so you really can't mix them up. Plastic washer, metal. This is what your shifter's connected to inside the car. Now I'm just gonna unbolt the assembly. That is, just, rather than try to deal with all the stuff there. There's a ground that I have to disconnect here in order to get this harness up out of my way. All these fasteners are the same size, so I'm not too worried about exactly where those go. I got one more to disconnect down the front here. That may be a job for those special pliers again. Hopefully the fight with the harness is over. Hopefully. Looks like we got something inside this fuse relay box we need to disconnect. And that would be this 8mm right there. It's a main power feed. One last one. Hopefully, this is the last one. There. You know, it would have been easier to show you all this stuff without that harness in the way. As you can see, it certainly opens up the real estate. Got a ground here, but that'll come with the engine mount. I'm just gonna take this whole shifter assembly, 3 12mm fasteners. Remove those. If these are all the same length, we're good. Well, they're not. There's 2 long and 2 short. The short one goes back here. So I know the short one goes in here. I'll remember that. Or I won't. And you'll remind me. I'm just going to remove this engine mount. I know that this side of the transmission is actually supported by gravity on the stuff under there, so I'm just going to remove this whole mount and everything as long as I'm here. Looks like we got 17, 17, a 12 up here, and maybe a couple of 17s or something down here, not sure. First, the ground. And ground bolts are often special. So I often take my ground bolts or thread them in a little. These feel like 14s to me. All right, one more 14 that I didn't see. There's an engine mount in the back here, cover, 2 17s on the outside, and then there's another fastener under here. I'm just gonna have to disconnect those to get to where I need to get to. Also, I'm noticing, now that I'm here, there is a harness connection to the power steering hose. The high pressure power steering hose. It sends a signal to the computer and tells it that it needs to raise the idle because you got the steering wheel cranked all the way one way. And I think that's it as far as electrical stuff. Long extension, I think, will be our friend here. This one comes in from the back side here. It's a 14. Sometimes it's better if you don't look and you just reach down and do it. You know, as a kid, I was always told, look with your eyes, not with your hands. How wrong they were. Back mount disconnected. I'll make sure that that vacuum line isn't going someplace else important. It's little things that get damaged when you move big things around. No problem. The rear engine mount also has a vacuum line that I just disconnected from this other one. We're just about done. We've gone around our circle. Rear engine mount is disconnected and ready. We still have the side engine mount when the time comes, which will be at the end because that is holding up that whole side there. If we disconnect that, the whole engine will, so we need to make sure that we're supported at that time. We need to get this engine mount, which no big deal. It's really easy to get to now with everything out of the way. So remove this O2 sensor wire. That'll give us a little bit better access. The bump faces the back. Don't want to damage the condenser, but it was nice to be able to knock it loose. Front mount is disconnected. And that concludes part 1 of the TL engine replacement video. Yes, we're not done yet, so tune in next time. Either that or there'll be a link in the description to the next video and you can just keep on rolling. If you have automotive questions, EricTheCarGuy.com. Wish to connect with me socially, Google+, Facebook, Twitter, and now Instagram. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you in the next episode.